All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Doyle. I am the sales manager from Royal Force Systems, in charge of the food and beverage vertical. And today I'm going to take you through the FSMA 204 regulation. What is it? Who needs to worry about it? It's coming up. You've got about 15 months until you need to be compliant with FSMA 204. So today we're going to talk about how to make sure that you are compliant. Is your warehouse ready? If you're not ready yet, don't worry. You've got plenty of time. We can help you with that. Today's session will be a good overview of it, and we're happy to have in-depth discussions with you at a later point, one-on-one, to talk about your specific operation, what you need to do in order to be compliant with FSMA. So with that, we'll get started. If you do have any questions, if you can type them into the chat box, and we'll get them to them at the end of the webinar. All right, so here's our agenda. What is FSMA 204? Who needs to comply? What foods are included in FSMA? We're going to talk about the components of what they call the final rule. We'll go through implementing your FSMA plan, take you through a summary, FSMA 204 in a nutshell. If you had to give somebody an elevator pitch about what is FSMA, who, when, everything, that'll take you through that. But wait, there's more. And yeah, those handling foods on the food traceability list, the FTL. It aims to quickly identify and remove potentially contaminated foods, reducing foodborne illnesses and deaths. Unfortunately, there have been deaths because of people consuming items. Romaine lettuce is a big one. Some wheat products have been recalled because of listeria, salmonella, what have you. So the FDA, they want to quickly address when they see an issue. Some people are starting to get sick. Where did those people get the food? Where did it come from? Trace that from the final retailer who provided the food to you, whether that's your grocery store, a restaurant, what have you, all the way back to the farm, the specific part of the field where the food came from. That is what the aim of FSMA 204 is, so that they can quickly identify the suspect foods and pull them out of the supply chain so that others don't get sick, and prevent any deaths if possible. So that's the what. Let's go into who needs to comply with this. Well, the traceability requirements apply to anyone in the food supply chain that grows, handles, manufactures, packages, or holds and distributes foods on the food traceability list. Specifically applies to any entity, whether it's a specific person, the farmer Bob down the street, to large corporations or large industrial farms that handle these foods, produce these foods, process these foods, distribute these foods in some way. What foods are on the food traceability list? Well, the FTL defines products that the FDA has determined are a higher risk of carrying foodborne illnesses. That's why you don't see everything on here. You're not going to see beef on this list. You're not going to see chicken on this list, turkey, that type of stuff. But we're looking at food specifically at the higher risk of carrying some type of foodborne illness. Romaine lettuce is a big one. We'll get into the list here in a second. They want these foods to be subject to additional tracking requirements. That's why they've narrowed down this list from everything that we consume to a specific subset of what is consumed. The agency, the FDA, makes the important distinction that the rule applies not only to foods that are specifically listed here, but also to any foods that contain the listed foods as ingredients. So let's say eggs are on the list. If you're a deli and you're making egg salad, you are now under the food traceability list, and you've got to capture some data elements because of that. So here is a listing, a graphic. Cheeses, soft cheeses are the one that they're looking for here. Shell eggs, nut butters, cucumbers, all kinds of different. If you have produce, if it came off a plant, pretty much you need to worry about it. If it's a cheese or it's a nut butter and egg, thin fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and then ready to made deli salads, all on the food traceability list. So we need to make sure that if you've got something here in some way or another and you touch it during the supply chain, you are going to be under the requirements what FSMA 204 is spelling out for you. So let's talk about the final rule and the components of it. The final rule is three main components: the traceability lot code, or the TLC, the critical tracking events, the CTEs, and the key data elements, the KDEs. The critical tracking events are, what part of the supply chain are you in? If you're a food processor, you're a food distributor, you are doing something in the middle, you're doing the cooling, the initial cooling. Those are critical tracking events that need to have data points depending on which event captured. And those data points are what we call the key data elements, the items that we need to capture. So somebody is not on mute. If you could go ahead and mute yourself, just we're getting a little bit of background noise. Thank you. The traceability lot code. Let's dive a little bit deeper into this because this is kind of the big one. It's a unique alphanumeric identifier for a lot of food. And it's assigned when the food is either initially packaged, received from a fishing vessel, or transformed in some way. It must remain the same throughout the supply chain unless the food is transformed. So let's say we've got some tomatoes, they are grown, they are assigned a TLC. That lot number will, as long as those tomatoes stay unprocessed or transformed in some way, that TLC, that lot code, will stay the same from the initial picking all the way through to the retailer. So that lot code stays consistent. If that tomato is now made into some kind of deli salad, that has now changed and a new lot code will be assigned because that food has been transformed. So we need to not only trace the initial lot code of that tomato, but we also need to trace that lot code through at the salad that includes that tomato at the end. So it gets pretty big here what you need to trace there. The traceability lot code source. This is the physical location where the TLC is assigned, including such things as key contact information, the business name, address, phone number, what have you. And then the TLC, the source reference, is an alternative method for providing the FDA access to the TLC source location description, such as a food facility registration number or a secured website address. And we'll dive into this here in a second so you see what all this means. The importance of the traceability lot code. Documenting the TLCs and their sources, it helps the FDA to quickly trace the origin of food when something happens, when a recall needs to be addressed because people are getting sick. It bypasses the intermediate steps in the supply chain, and it links the food to firms that handled it, which is crucial during the investigation of the outbreak. Examples of the TLC can be a Julian date, a lot code, a batch code, or production date. The TLC source description, as we spoke about on the previous slide, would be something like a specific farm, Taylor Farms, the address, phone number, what have you. And then the alternate source reference can be the FDA food facility registration number or secure web address for that facility. So that's what is making up the TLC. So real world usage. Firms must link the TLCs and other KDEs, which is our key data elements, the pieces of data that we've got to track, lot number, quantity, sizing, that type of stuff, in their records, and include them for reference documents like bills of lading and invoices so that those data points carry on downstream. So if you are a processor, you've got to provide that information to the shipper that comes to pick it up, to the cooling folks, to the final wholesale distributor, to the restaurant, grocery store, what have you. Smaller traceability lots can help limit the scope of recalls. So instead of saying it came from, in our previous slide, Taylor Farms, we want to say it came from Taylor's Farms on this date from specific field section 109, something like that. That way we know that, hey, maybe that, we can look at that specific portion of the farm and say, oh, we see that the deer have gotten in here and, they're defecating or something in that field. We need to, figure this out, put up a fence to keep the deer out, something like that. The FDA wants to try to get as granular as possible so that all the foods from Taylor Farms are not having to be recalled, just that specific that area. That's why they want the TLCs as granular as possible. So the flexibility, the rule does not prescribe any specific method for defining or assigning the lot codes. It's allowing the firms to use existing practices and tools as long as they meet the requirements set up in the final rule. So do yourself a favor, go through the FDA website. I've got a link here at the end in our resources page. Go through what do we need to do to either are we compliant today? Do we need to change something, what have you, in order to meet the requirements of the rule? Here are some examples of what the lot code could look like. It could be if you're doing with GS1 128 barcodes, you can have the item number there is in 01, the produced on date is 17, and then the lot code is that that designation after the 10 there. The next side, or in the middle there on the left-hand side, is 6-digit code, a letter to represent the grower, manufacturer, location, what have you. At the bottom there, company name, product production location, the product grower, Julian date. And then you can see, we've got different things on the right-hand side there. So again, the FDA is not telling you how to create these lot codes. It's just telling you what they need out of the lot code. So if you're using one of these formats today, great, continue to. If you're not using or creating lot numbers today, well, then pick one of these examples. It's going to be easiest for you to implement and go forth with that. The critical tracking events, the CTEs. So if you are doing anything with harvesting, cooling, initial packing, first land-based receiving on for seafood, shipping, receiving, or transformation, you are under FSMA 204 if the items you are working with were on that traceability list or an ingredient part of your end items. Key data elements, the KDEs. These are the specific data points required for each CTE, critical tracking event, such as the location, description, the quantity, unit of measure, traceability lot code. So some examples are the commodity, the variety, the date you received the food, the traceability lot code, the quantity and unit measure of pack. These are just some of the KDEs that are out there. And they're specific. So the KDEs for somebody in the initial cooling will be different from somebody who's doing transformation or distribution, what have you. So you've got to look to see. Here's an example. At the top there in the circles, we've got the different events, the critical tracing events, tracking events that we need to figure out where we fit in the supply chain. So if I'm a harvester, I've got the specific key data elements for harvesting. They are different than if I'm a distributor there towards the right-hand side. I need to have my KDEs for distributor. So I receive items in from a producer or processor, maybe the specific farm, and then I'm shipping them out to the final user, whether it's a retail food establishment, a school, a hospital, restaurant, what have you. So the key data elements are different depending on what your part is in the supply chain itself. So figure that out, where you lie, which one of those bubbles at the top best fits you, and then under that, which data elements you have to track. So implementing your FSMA plan. There's no specific format required for the traceability plan. The FDA has left this up to you how to do this, but they're mandating what you need to give them. Again, those KDEs for those key data elements for each of those tracking events that we have during the way. But the information in the traceability plan must meet the requirements as described in 1.1315 of the Food Traceability Rule and reflect the current practices specific to the covered entity. So this may be updated. This plan has changed so many times. It was first signed into law under Obama's first presidency, first term. So it continues to change. Right now, we've got the final rule, which is due again January 20th, 2026, 15 months or so from now. It may change between now and then. Once you have this set and you're all good, it may change again. So this is an evolving thing as the FDA makes better choices or requirements to help narrow the time down from when people are getting sick to a recall, they're going to continue to change this. So it's not set in stone, but right now you've got a pretty good shot of what we need for the next 15 months. Here's a plan example. So you've got a name, the business name, the address. You've got the procedures to maintain the records, procedures to identify the foods, how we're going to assign the lot codes, a point of contact, the farm map, and then the traceability plan updates. So we've got two examples of the farm maps. Example one, you can take a satellite feed and put some graphics over top of it, or you can draw on a piece of paper. It gives you the same information. But if there is a lot code and we know that this farm, field C or field section CO2 is where the items came from that people are getting sick from, we can now take that field offline and still produce from our other fields. So we're not taking the whole farm out of the equation, just the specific section of the farm that has had the possible contamination there. It may not have happened at the farm. It may have happened, somewhere downstream from there, but they want to track it all the way back to the farm just to knock it out to make sure that more people are not going to get sick. So sortable spreadsheet. This is big. The FDA, if a recall happens, God forbid, they want you to produce a sortable spreadsheet with the key data elements required for your portion of the supply chain. And you've got to do this within 24 hours. So you have to meet the FDA's requirements of an electronic copy of a sortable spreadsheet. That's what you need to provide. So they're not telling you what format needs to be in, how that data gets into the spreadsheet. If you have to key this in manually, that's your process. Well, that's what you guys are going to do. But this happens for each of the critical tracking events along the food supply chain, harvesting, cooling, first land-based receiving, what have you. And you must provide the key data elements that correspond to that critical tracking event. So an example of harvesting, you need to include these KDEs. Again, this is not a complete list, but the name of the company receiving your product, phone number of location, street address of location receiving your product, commodity, quantity, unit of measure, what have you. There are more KDEs for harvesting, but this is just an example. You need to provide that in a sortable spreadsheet. The FDA on their website, and the link I have here at the end will take you there, has sortable spreadsheets for you to use. Add a template. So for harvesting, it says here are the dozen or so key data elements we need to track for harvesting. No need to reinvent the wheel. Just take the spreadsheet off the FDA website and use that, and you'll be good to go. So FSMA 204 in a nutshell, the why, when, who, how, and for how long. Why? FSMA 204 is the foundation for effective and efficient tracing of food. It's also a great way to help ensure food safety and supply chain transparency. So you may grumble like, I don't really, why do we have to do this? We want to save lives. We want to get foods that are contaminated in some form or fashion out of the hands of people that may consume it. That's why we're doing this. When? You need to start collecting the key data elements for the foods on the food traceability list as of January 20th, 2026. So food items that are in the process of moving through the supply chain prior to that. So if you are a cooler and you receive something on the 19th, that does not need to, you don't need to track that. Once that food gets all the way through the retailer, the next batch coming in, anything that hits your dock as of 12/01 on January 20th, 2026 needs to be part of the FSMA plan. So who? Again, anyone who grows, handles, manufactures, package, or holds foods on the food traceability list. How? Information about specific foods and specific date ranges or traceability lot code ranges must be provided to us, that's the FDA, in an electronic sortable spreadsheet in accordance with that rule, along with other information needed to understand the information that is in the spreadsheet. So if you're using the FDA spreadsheet, you should be good. If you're going to be using your own spreadsheet, you may have to provide them with some backup information. Let's say a good example of that is that the the picture of the farm with the different um, lots there, the different sections. You may need to provide that in addition to the sortable spreadsheets. So just know that you may have to have other things. How firms maintain their records on paper will be required to create such spreadsheets using the information contained in the paper record. So again, if you're old school, if you're a two-person business, a family business, and you don't have a computer of any sort, and you're doing everything paper, that's fine. But you're going to need to take that information that you've recorded on paper, key that into a spreadsheet, and then pass that information back the to the FDA. So that's what the rule mandates. For how long? 2 years. You need to have that information available for 2 years after you have taken it. So obviously the grower, their 2 years will be, a few days to a few weeks short of what the final restaurant, the final retailer, what have you, has to keep their records for the same item just because of the time it takes to move through the supply chain. But wait, there's more. This is kind of the gotcha. More and more retailers, such as Walmart, Kroger, I believe Amazon, Wegmans, are starting to require key data elements for foods that are not on the food traceability list. Things such as snack foods, canned goods, frozen foods, what have you. These retailers are mandating that they want this food so that they have the information they need if they've got to do a recall of some sort. So even though the FDA may not mandate this for canned goods, a can of soup, let's say the FDA doesn't care about that because that can of soup is a very low chance of containing something that would be starting foodborne illness. But they are Walmart, Kroger, et cetera, are going to start mandating this on their own. And some of these retailers want to start tracking this data prior to the January 2026 date that the FDA has set up for tracking. So talk to your customers. If you're dealing with one of these big guys, they may be coming and saying, hey, we want this data sooner. And they may want more points of data than what the FDA is mandating. So this is going to be pushed down to a lot of companies that don't think they're going to have to comply with this because they don't deal with the foods on the food traceability list today. It looks like it's going to be the industry itself is going to be mandating these key data elements are tracked, whether the food's on the traceability list or not. These retailers also want their data electronically and in different formats. So if you're old school and trying to do this on paper, you're gonna have trouble meeting the requirements of the retailers. So a electronic system of some sort that has the capability to present the data in different formats based on who your customer is and connect seamlessly with other systems is going to be the way that you're going to need to go. So there may be some investment for some of you. For a lot of you, probably already have a system in place. If not, talk to us. We can help you with that for sure. Even small retailers are starting to demand that their suppliers provide them with the data elements in electronic format for foods, products that are not on the food traceability list. They want the specific format so they can keep their own records, and they need this because they may be using things to produce, especially in a deli as an example, produce salads, coleslaws, etc. So things that may not be on the raisins are not on the food traceability list, but they may put them into a Waldorf salad or something that has other things that are on food traceability list. So that will be now that ingredient is now something that needs to be tracked. And all aspects of the supply chain are moving to electronic data systems so that they can easily collaborate with others. That's a big thing. These guys want to be able to push data seamlessly from throughout the supply chain. So if you're a cog in that wheel somewhere, you're going to be tasked soon enough to be able to send data electronically and get data electronically. That's the way the world is moving. So having a system that's going to allow you to easily communicate with other systems will be key for you. You want to be able to meet the requirements of the FDA, meet the requirements of retailers. Right now, the large guys, but the smaller guys are coming on board. They want the data and they want it electronically and seamlessly. And then you're going to need to be able to meet these requirements so that you can grow your business with new suppliers and new customers. So key resources, a full listing of the FSMA 204 rule, including a great overview video. The video I've watched is about 14 minutes. It talks to you about why, the how, the what's. Watch that video. It's at that link that I have there. It'll also take you through
Jay, did you send this email
food
to Tony's,
traceability
Tony's
list,
transfer one?
the critical tracking events, the key data elements, examples,
Never mind.
exceptions, assortable spreadsheet examples for each of those different areas, the different CTEs. And then the FAQ list is fantastic. It really answers all of your questions. And so fda.gov/food safety month. If you just Google it, FDA FSMA 204, you'll get to that. So
Yeah.
that is about the end that we
Well, Luke,
have.
I'm glad we
who
got
are
Dustin,
we?
because
We're Royal
Drew
Force
has a
Systems.
hurricane, and
We're a 40-year-old company.
Dustin,
We've been around
and
since
you know, without
1984. We are
those are good
system
rates.
authors.
But
We
like,
sell warehouse management systems.
whoever replaces Justin is just
We have
awesome.
broad industry experience. We also have yard management systems. If you guys have a need for lots of
But dude,
trucks coming in and out of
he's
your
chopping up trees in his front
docks,
yard.
dock scheduling, we do distribution,
Does
whether
he have
it's
time to do it?
specific distribution warehouses, 3PLs, retail, what have you. So
For a one-on-one?
if you need help with your
Where?
FSMA plan, we're more than happy to have a
Tell him-
discussion with you,
and
whether you're
ask
going
him
to
why
use
so
our
much.
system or not. If you need a system, talk to us. We work from the small guys up to the large, corporate entities that have dozens of warehouses, what have you. So we're happy to talk to you, whether you're small, mid-sized, or a large company
Good
that has some
job, Dustin.
need to
You better make sure these get picked up.
compliant with the FSMA
And make sure you have the right
requirement.
temperatures on there.
So that's all we have. I don't see any questions. If you do have a question, please let us know.
Just give you a how I use your credit. Like, what?
My name is Joe Doyle. With me, I've got Tony and Rick. We are happy. We make up the food team.
Just make
we are
sure
happy to answer the questions that you guys have. So that's all we have. We are just about at the time we said. We're happy to talk to you. So please let us know how we can help. Thank you so much. We appreciate